She stood in the open street, clothes torn, holding her arms tight across her chest under the punishing Wyoming sun. Laughter echoed from the men who had done this, spitting at her bare feet. To the watching crowd, it looked insane, but to the Carson family, it was justice. No one spoke. No one interfered. Emily Parker, 28, had lost far more than just fabric that day. Her husband was gone, taken by fever months ago. The family he'd left behind didn't come to offer comfort. They came to crush her. They called her useless, another mouth not worth feeding, and they made certain the whole town saw it. The heat turned the dirt into a red powder that clung to her sweat and tears, a stain everyone could witness. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. Silence was the only armor she had left, though her heart hammered her chest. The Carson patriarch, eyes hard as river stones, leaned down from his saddle and spat in front of her. His two sons grinned like coyotes, their shadows long in the sinking sun. Then they turned away, climbing back on their horses, their cruel laughter trailing like poison. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts or your own story in the comments below. The people of Cheyenne shifted on their feet, uneasy. Some looked away in shame. Others stared with approval. In the end, no one moved. No one reached for her. She was left alone in the dust, weighed down by humiliation. Then came the sound, hoofbeats steady and deliberate, cutting through the last echoes of laughter. A rider approached on the shimmering horizon. He didn't hurry. He didn't hesitate. Dust clung to his boots, to the brim of his hat, to the lines of his weathered face. His name was Jack Bennett, 52, a cattleman who'd lived at the edge of town so long he was almost forgotten. Jack swung down from his horse in one smooth motion. The years sat on him, but he carried them well. He looked at Emily once and spoke, his voice low and firm. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement solid as the mountains beyond the valley. As the dust swirled and the crowd held its breath, Emily wondered what she was walking into. She'd been cast out by cruelty. Was she now stepping towards safety, or something even worse? The ride out of Cheyenne was silent. Emily sat stiff in the saddle, wrapped in the rough wool blanket Jack had handed her. She didn't look back at the town. There was nothing left to see, only dust and the laughter still ringing in her ears. By the time they reached Jack's ranch along the Powder River, the sun was bleeding red across the horizon. His place was plain, a weathered house, a barn creaking in the wind, fences holding a few stubborn cattle. No riches, no glory, just solid ground that was his. Jack dismounted and helped her down, steady but wordless. Inside, the air smelled of old wood smoke and cold coffee. The furniture was handmade, rough but dependable. A stone fireplace stood swept clean. Jack pointed to a small side door. "That room's yours." On the bed lay a simple cotton dress, faded but washed, folded neat. Clothes that once belonged to his mother. For the first time that day, Emily felt something she couldn't name. Not comfort, not yet. But at least the cruelty had stopped, and that alone was a kind of mercy. She set her few belongings in the drawer, but her fingers brushed paper. A folded letter, half-written, the ink pale with age. She read just a few words before her breath caught. "Mr. Carson, about what happened in Kansas." Her pulse raced. Kansas. The Carsons, the same men who had just ruined her life. Why would Jack be writing to them? Why keep such a letter hidden? She shoved it back, hands shaking. The room that felt safe now seemed smaller, tighter, like a trap closing around her. That night, Jack set out 2 plates of beans and bread. He ate in silence, never asking her name. Emily chewed slowly, her thoughts louder than the crackle of the fire. Had she left one kind of danger for another? She glanced at Jack, his face lined from sun and years, unreadable as stone, and felt a cold question settle deep in her chest. Was the man who rescued her somehow tied to the very family she feared? And if so, what happened in Kansas? The next morning, Emily woke to pale light creeping through the small window. The plain dress Jack had left for her lay waiting. She slipped it on, still stiff from the dirt road and the fear that hadn't yet left her bones. Outside, she could hear the low murmur of cattle and the scrape of boots on the porch. Jack was already up, coffee steaming in a chipped mug. He didn't greet her with questions, just a short nod. It felt strange, after the public shame, after being dragged through the street, that someone could look at her without judgment or pity. "Eat," he said simply, setting bread on the table. She sat, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The memory of the Carsons' laughter clung to her like dust. She tried to swallow the bread, but it stuck in her throat. Jack didn't push, didn't ask. He just kept working at his coffee, eyes quiet but watchful. Later, when he saddled his horse to mend the pasture fence, she lingered in the doorway. Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Jack cinched the saddle tight. "Because no one else would. No more than that. No comfort, no smile. Just plain truth." Emily tried to busy herself inside the small house, sweeping the plank floors, folding and refolding the dress she'd been given. Anything to silence the restless thudding in her chest. But every time she opened the drawer and thought of that letter, her stomach turned cold. Mr. Carson, Kansas. What was Jack's connection to them? 2 days passed in uneasy quiet. Jack worked from dawn to dusk, fixing gates, hauling hay, saying little. Emily stayed near the house, afraid to step too far from the walls. At night, she'd hear the wind creak through the barn boards and wonder if it carried riders with it. Late one afternoon, standing on the porch, she froze. A lone figure sat on horseback along the ridge east of the valley, still as stone, watching. The sun threw a shadow long and sharp across the hills. She didn't need to see his face to feel it, the silence of a predator waiting. When Jack came back from the pasture, sweat darkening his shirt, she said nothing. She only searched his face for any sign he'd seen the rider. He gave her none. That evening he cleaned his rifle at the kitchen table, the soft scrape of cloth against steel filling the room. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. 2 mornings later, the watcher came down from the ridge. Dust trailed behind his horse as he rode straight into the yard. Emily's heart thudded hard enough to hurt when she recognized him, one of the Carson sons. He swung off his horse without a word and reached for her arm. Panic flared white-hot in her chest. Before she could cry out, Jack moved faster than she thought a man his age could. He tore the younger man off his feet, his fist crashing against his jaw with a sound that cracked louder than cicadas in the heat. The fight was brutal and short. Within moments, the Carson boy was groaning in the dust, scrambling to his horse, clutching his ribs. Jack didn't speak, didn't boast. He just stood there, breathing steady, his silence sharper than any threat. As the rider fled back the way he came, Emily stared, shaken. She thought Jack was just quiet, just patient. Now she saw the steel beneath it. And for the first time since that day in Cheyenne, something inside her shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the faintest spark of safety. That night, Jack sat across from her at the table, his knuckles raw, his eyes calm as if nothing had happened. Emily forced herself to eat, though every bite tasted of fear and questions. "Who were you writing to?" she asked suddenly. Jack's eyes didn't flicker. "You've been through enough. Don't go digging where you don't have to." But Emily already knew. The letter was real, and the Carsons were not done with her. The ranch stayed quiet for 2 days after the fight. Emily told herself maybe it was over. Maybe the Carsons had been humiliated enough to leave her alone. But deep down she knew men like that didn't let go. They only came back stronger. On the 3rd evening, dark clouds rolled in from the west. The sky bruised purple, thunder crawling low and heavy like drums in the distance. Emily stood on the porch, gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. She felt it before she saw them. 3 riders cutting through the rain, riding hard straight for the house. The Carson patriarch, flanked by his 2 sons. Jack stepped out of the barn, water streaking down his face, boots sinking into mud. He didn't speak, but his posture told her everything. He knew this fight wouldn't end with fists. The eldest Carson reined his horse hard and pointed up at the porch. "She's ours by right. Send her out." His voice cracked like a whip in the storm. One of the sons swung down, rope in hand, striding through the rain toward the steps. Emily's breath caught. Her body moved before her mind did. She ran inside, grabbed the rifle Jack had left against the wall, and stumbled back to the door. Her hands shook so bad the barrel wavered, her finger barely finding the trigger. She wanted to be brave, but fear made her knees weak. The son laughed at her trembling arms. He took another step. Then Jack's voice cut through the thunder. Calm, sharp, final. Cole, I know what you did in Kansas. The words slammed harder than any shot. The Carson patriarch froze. His sons stared at him, confusion breaking across their faces, but he wouldn't meet their eyes. His jaw worked, his hand twitched near his belt, then fell away. Emily lowered the rifle a fraction, heart pounding so loud she could hear it over the storm. She didn't understand the meaning of Jack's words, but she understood their weight. And so did the Carsons. No more threats, no more rope. Without another word, they turned, mud flying from their horses as they rode off into the rain, their anger swallowed by the storm. Jack didn't move. He stayed in the yard, silent, letting the water run off him. Emily stood on the porch with the rifle clutched to her chest, shaking from head to toe. Her life hadn't been spared by bullets. It had been spared by a secret buried in Kansas. And secrets like that had a way of coming back. The storm broke before dawn, washing the valley clean. The air smelled of wet sage and earth, and the Powder River ran high and loud. Emily woke, sore from holding herself tense all night. The rifle leaned against the wall where she'd left it. Jack was already outside at first light, checking the fences that nearly blew down. His movements were calm, almost ordinary, like facing down the Carsons had been no different than hauling hay. That quiet strength unsettled Emily, but it steadied her too. In the days that followed, the ranch found a new rhythm. Emily began stepping past the walls of the little house. She weeded the garden, mended clothes, and found an old chipped teacup in a drawer. She spent hours piecing it back together, the cracks still showing but strong enough to hold water again. When she filled it with wildflowers and set on the windowsill, Jack noticed. He didn't say a word, but he smiled. And that single smile said more than any speech could. For Emily, that cup wasn't just porcelain. It was her life, broken, repaired, not perfect, but still able to hold something beautiful. She realized healing wasn't about erasing scars. It was about carrying them with dignity, turning them into strength. And just when she started to believe maybe, just maybe, she could stay, she saw dust on the horizon again. The third week on the ranch began like a hell breath. The storm had passed, the fences were mended, and Jack's cattle grazed as though nothing had happened. But Emily couldn't shake the weight sitting in her chest. Every time the wind carried a sound, a distant hoofbeat, the groan of the barn boards, her heart jumped. Jack worked sunup to sundown, steady and silent, as though the confrontation with the Carsons had never happened. He never mentioned Kansas, never spoke about the letter she'd found, and never asked why her hand still shook when someone so much as knocked on wood. His quiet steadiness was strange comfort and strange torment at once. She didn't know if it meant she could trust him or if he simply didn't care. One afternoon, she tried to talk, just to hear another human voice. "When was the last time you had anyone out here?" she asked, setting down a pail of water. Jack looked at her over the fence rail, his face unreadable. "Been a while. Folks like to keep their distance." "Because of you?" she asked carefully. He shrugged. "Because of what they think I am." Then he turned back to his work, conversation closed. Emily swallowed her words. Whatever people thought of him, she was learning there was truth in it. Jack didn't live in anyone's shadow but his own. And maybe that was why he could stand up to the Carsons without flinching. Still, the silence of the ranch was heavy. At night, she lay awake in the small room he'd given her, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering if someone was out there in the dark. Her dreams were full of ropes and spurs and the cruel laughter from Cheyenne. Twice she woke with her nails dug into her palms hard enough to leave marks. By the end of the week, just as she began to think the Carsons might actually be done with her, she saw dust again on the far edge of the valley. A single rider at first, then two. They lingered out there for hours, just shapes on the horizon, like wolves testing the fence line. When Jack came back from a barn that evening, she met him at the door. "They're watching," she whispered. "I saw them." "I know," he said simply, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't look surprised. "Why aren't you doing something?" Fear sharpened her voice more than she intended. "I am," he said. "I'm waiting." She didn't understand. Waiting felt like doing nothing. Waiting felt like inviting danger through the front door. That night at supper, the air inside the small house was thick enough to choke on. Jack ate his bread and beans like it was any other night. Emily tried to force hers down, but her hands were unsteady, and her mind kept circling back to the letter, to Kansas, to the way Carson's father had frozen at Jack's words. "Jack," she said finally, "what happened there? What do you know about them?" He set down his cup. For a long time he didn't answer, just watched the fire in the hearth like it held the only truth he trusted. "Emily, some things are better left buried," he said at last. Her temper flared hot. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they dragged through the street." His eyes flicked up then, hard and tired. "You think I don't know what they're capable of? You think I haven't seen men like that tear lives apart?" His voice was still low, but there was a weight in it she hadn't heard before. She pressed her lips together. The heat in her chest turned to something else, a cold, creeping unease. Whoever Jack Bennett really was, his past was tied to theirs, and she had no way to tell if that made her safer or put her in even greater danger. The next morning, she found him saddling his horse before dawn. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Checking the east fence," he said, but she didn't believe it. There was a rifle tied to the saddle, and the way he moved, tense, purposeful, told her this wasn't about mending posts. All that day she worked in a fog of worry, folding and refolding the same towel, sweeping the same corner until her arms ached. By afternoon, she couldn't take the waiting anymore. She climbed to the porch roof to get a better view of the valley. And that's when she saw them. 3 riders now, not 2. This time they weren't staying on the ridge. They were coming straight for the ranch. Her breath caught. Jack wasn't back yet. By the time she scrambled down and ran to the yard, the horses were close enough for her to see their faces. The Carson patriarch, grim and furious, and his sons riding tight at his sides. Rain threatened in the darkening sky, wind pushing hard across the grass. Emily's first instinct was to hide, but there was no hiding now. They were coming for her, and Jack wasn't here to stop them. She darted inside, heart pounding, fumbling for the rifle leaning by the door. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped it. She backed to the porch, raised the barrel, and prayed her finger wouldn't slip before she had to pull. The riders reined up so close she could see mud splashed on their boots. The father pointed at her, his voice raw with anger. "You think an old man can keep you safe?" he barked. "You come down here now, girl, or we drag you off this porch ourselves." Emily's voice cracked, but held. "Stay back," she shouted, though it sounded more like a plea than a warning. The younger son laughed, swinging down from his horse. "Look at her hands shaking," he jeered, stepping closer. "You gonna shoot me, or drop that thing first?" She swallowed hard, fear rising up her throat like bile. "Don't," she whispered, though it felt as if no sound came out at all. And just when her knees almost buckled, hoofbeats pounded from behind. Jack rode in fast, horse lathered from the run. He swung down in one motion, putting himself between her and the Carsons, his voice quiet but hard as iron. "Step back," he said. The son smirked. "Or what? You gonna hit me again, old man?" Jack's eyes didn't move from the father. "You bring your boys here again, Cole," he said evenly, "and I'll tell the whole territory what you did in Kansas." The wind cut through the yard, carrying his words like a knife. Cole Carson froze, his jaw tightening, rain starting to spit against his hat brim. His sons looked from him to Jack, confused. The rope in the younger son's hand dropped to the ground. The rain came down harder, streaking through the air in silver lines. For a moment no one moved. Jack stood still as stone, blocking the steps with his body. Emily stayed behind him, gripping the rifle so tight her hands hurt. Cole Carson's face twisted like he'd swallowed fire. His sons waited, restless on their horses, not sure if they should draw their guns or turn around. Jack didn't raise his voice, didn't reach for his rifle. He just let the silence stretch until the thunder drowned out every breath. "You don't want me talking," Jack said, his tone calm and even. "You know why." Cole's jaw worked. He looked at Emily once, then back at Jack. His hand hovered near his belt, then dropped. Without another word, he wheeled his horse around. The 2 sons followed, throwing angry looks over their shoulders. Mud splashed under their hooves as they rode hard out of the yard, disappearing into the gray curtain of rain. Emily felt her knees weaken. She lowered the rifle, her heart still slamming against her ribs so hard it hurt to breathe. Jack stayed in the yard a long moment after they left, letting the water run off his hat brim, eyes locked on the direction they'd gone. Inside, she leaned against the wall, chest heaving. When Jack finally came in, dripping wet, she whispered, "What did you mean? What happened in Kansas?" Jack shook off his coat and hung it near the fire. "It's not something you need to carry," he said. "I need to know," she pressed, voice sharp now. "You're hiding something from me. Are you working with him?" His eyes flashed with anger. Not wild anger, but tired anger, like a man who'd had this fight too many times in his own head. "I don't work with men like that," he said, voice low but firm. "But I know what they've done. That's all you need to understand." Emily wanted to shout, to demand the whole truth, but the look on his face stopped her. It wasn't fear she saw. It was something heavier, almost like regret. The next morning, the sky was clear again. Jack was already out in the pasture at sunrise, checking the cattle, as if nothing had happened. Emily watched him from the porch, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and dread. He had saved her life twice now, but with words, not bullets. What kind of secret could be so strong it could turn armed men away in a storm? Days passed, but the ranch no longer felt steady. Emily kept glancing to the horizon, expecting to see dust or riders. Jack said little. When he wasn't working, he cleaned his rifle, sharpened tools, and fixed every loose board he could find. She knew it wasn't just busy work. He was waiting for something. One afternoon, Emily wandered out to the barn. She needed to feel useful, to feel less like a guest and more like someone who belonged. She started sweeping the dirt floor when she spotted something half buried under a tarp. An old trunk, metal corners rusted, lid padlocked. Curiosity burned hotter than caution. She tugged the tarp away and wiped the dust off the lid. The initials on the side made her chest go cold. C.C. Cole Carson. What was a Carson trunk doing in Jack's barn? That evening, when Jack came in for supper, she tried to act calm, but her voice betrayed her. "Why do you have something of theirs here?" Jack set down his hat, eyes narrowing slightly. "You've been looking through my things?" "I live here too," she said, louder than she meant. "You keep telling me to trust you, but how can I if you're keeping their name under your roof?" Jack didn't answer right away. He poured coffee instead, the smell filling the small kitchen. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "That trunk isn't theirs anymore. It's mine, and what's inside stays there." Emily's stomach nodded. "If you're hiding something that could get us both killed, I have a right to know." Jack looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're alive because of what I know. That's all that matters right now." She turned away, tears stinging her eyes, not just from fear, but from anger at being treated like a child. For the rest of the night, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind rattling the windows and the soft crackle of the fire. When Emily finally lay down, she couldn't sleep. She thought about the Carson trunk in the barn, about the letter in the drawer, about Jack's warning in the rain. She thought about how Cole Carson had gone pale when Jack spoke Kansas out loud. By dawn, she knew one thing for sure. The Carsons weren't finished. They'd be back, and next time words alone might not stop them. The days after the storm felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. Jack worked as he always did, steady and wordless, fixing gates, hauling water, patching the barn roof before autumn winds could tear at it. But Emily felt a change she couldn't name. The silence between them wasn't calm anymore. It was tight, filled with questions neither dared to speak. She kept glancing at the east ridge, afraid to see riders again. Sometimes she thought she saw dust far off, but it could have been wind kicking the ground. Other times she thought she felt eyes on her, even when no one was there. One morning, as Jack saddled his horse, Emily tried again. "They're coming back, aren't they?" Jack tightened the cinch without looking at her. "Men like that don't forget," he said. "Then tell me what Kansas means," she pleaded. "If you know something that scares them, I need to know too." Jack looked up at her then, and there was a sadness in his face she hadn't seen before. "Emily, if I tell you, you'll wish I hadn't." Then he swung into the saddle and rode off without another word. Emily stood in the yard long after he disappeared down the trail, the sound of hoofbeats fading until it was only the wind. She wrapped her arms around herself, wishing for warmth that wouldn't come. That afternoon, she tried to keep busy, baking bread, mending the dress Jack had given her, sweeping floors that were already clean. Anything to stop her thoughts from circling back to the locked trunk in the barn and the half-written letter in the drawer. But it didn't help. The house felt smaller every hour, as if its walls were closing in. When Jack returned at sundown, he looked tired but not surprised. "There's scouting again," he said simply, wiping sweat and dust from his face. Emily's throat went dry. "How close?" "Too close," he answered, hanging his hat on the wall. "But not tonight." That night they ate in silence. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire and the faint howl of coyotes in the distance. Emily kept catching Jack, watching her out of the corner of his eye, but he said nothing. When they finished supper, he slid his second rifle onto the table. "You know how to use it?" he asked. Her fingers brushed the stock, cold and unfamiliar. "Not really." Jack nodded once. "Then tomorrow you learn." The next day, the air felt thick and dry, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Jack set up old bottles on the fence and handed her the rifle. "Breathe steady," he said. "Don't pull the trigger, squeeze it. Let's surprise you." Emily's first shot went wide. The second wasn't any better. Jack didn't laugh, didn't scold, just adjusted her stance with quiet patience. By the 10th shot, she hit the bottle. The crack of breaking glass echoed across the field, and for the first time since Cheyenne, she felt something close to strength. Jack gave a short nod. "You'll do." That evening, as the sun burned low and red behind the hills, they stood on the porch watching the horizon. Emily felt almost safe for a moment. Almost. Then she saw it, a lone rider on the ridge, just watching. Not moving, not leaving. Jack's jaw tightened. "Go inside," he said. "Who is it?" she whispered. "One of theirs," Jack said. "And where there's one." He didn't finish the sentence, but Emily understood. That night, sleep wouldn't come. She lay awake listening to every creak of the old house, every rustle of wind against the door. At some point, she gave up and sat by the window, clutching the rifle Jack had left leaning nearby. Near dawn, she heard it. Hoofbeats again, closer this time, not passing on the ridge but circling the valley. She almost woke Jack, but then they faded away, swallowed by the hills. By morning, Jack looked more tired than she'd ever seen him. "They're waiting for their moment," he muttered while pouring coffee. "But they'll come." Emily set the chipped teacup on the windowsill, still holding wildflowers. She stared at it for a long time, at the cracks she had pieced together. "What if we run?" she asked quietly. Jack didn't even look up. "They'd follow. Men like that always do." "Then what do we do?" Her voice shook more than she wanted. Jack finally met her eyes. "We stand." There was no bravado in his voice, no fire, just simple truth. And somehow that was more frightening than anger. As the sun dipped that evening, Emily saw fresh dust on the trail. Not one rider. Not two. Three. Coming hard. This time they weren't scouting. Jack stepped off the porch, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the approaching horses. Emily's chest tightened as she followed him outside. She wanted to believe the lessons from yesterday would save her. She wanted to believe Jack's secret would keep them safe again. But the way his shoulders tensed told her this time would be different. "Stay close to me," Jack said quietly as the Carsons thundered into the yard. The ground shook under the horses as the Carsons charged into the yard. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears, so loud she barely heard Jack speak. He didn't shout, didn't curse. He just raised his rifle and stood still, like a man who'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Cole Carson reined up first, his face wet with sweat and dust, his eyes full of hate. His two sons flanked him, guns at their sides. The oldest son swung off his horse, boots sinking into the dirt. "We warned you," he growled. "Hand her over, old man." Jack didn't move. "You're not taking her." Cole sneered. "You think you can stop us with words again?" Jack's voice stayed calm. "I don't need words this time." Emily stood a step behind Jack, clutching the second rifle, so tight her hands burned. Every breath scraped her throat raw. She could feel her knees trembling, but she didn't dare move. The younger son, restless and mean, stepped closer. "She's ours," he spat. "You can't hide her forever." Jack's gaze didn't leave Cole. "I'm not hiding her. I'm protecting her." Big difference. The eldest Carson shifted his hand toward his revolver. Jack's rifle came up in one smooth motion. The sound of the lever sliding home was sharp as a whip crack. "Don't," Jack said. Everything went still. Only the creak of saddle leather. Only the horses blowing steam in the heat. Then Cole spoke, his voice low and rough. "You talk like a man with nothing to lose, Bennett. But everybody's got something." Jack's eye stayed hard. "You already took everything from me once. You won't do it again." The words made Emily's stomach twist. What did that mean? What had these men done to him before Kansas? The younger son lunged forward as if to test Jack's nerve. Emily flinched, raising her rifle with shaking arms. Jack didn't even glance back at her. His shot came first, kicking up dirt inches from a boy's boots. The crack echoed off the hills. "Next one's not a warning," Jack said flatly. The son froze, eyes wide, then backed up slow. Cole cursed under his breath. For the first time, Emily saw something different in his face, not just anger but doubt. Jack lowered his rifle slightly, but didn't let go of his stare. "Leave this valley, Cole. Take your boys and don't come back." The patriarch didn't answer right away. His jaw worked like he was chewing rocks. Finally, he spat into the dirt. "You're making this worse for her. You know that, don't you?" Jack didn't blink. "Maybe, but at least I'm not the kind of man who spits on a widow in the street." The insult landed. Cole's face went red, but still he didn't draw his gun. He yanked his reins hard and wheeled his horse. "This ain't over," he barked. "Not by a long shot." They rode off fast, mud and dust flying from the hooves, their anger trailing behind them like smoke. Emily watched them go, her whole body trembling so bad she thought her legs would give out. Jack lowered his rifle and let out a slow breath. "You all right?" he asked without turning. She tried to answer, but her voice caught in her throat. She nodded instead, clutching the gun until her knuckles ached. Back inside, Emily sank into a chair, her chest still tight. "They'll be back," she whispered. Jack set his rifle against the wall. "Yeah," he said simply. "But next time, they won't come talking." She looked at him, fear and anger swirling together. "Why are they so afraid of you? What do you know about Kansas?" Jack rubbed his hands over his face, looking older than his 52 years. "I know what they did there," he said quietly, "and I know who buried it." Emily swallowed hard. "You?" Jack's eyes met hers. "I was there." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire crackled low. The quiet in the room felt heavier than the fight outside. Emily realized then that whatever had happened in Kansas wasn't just a secret Jack used to scare men like Cole Carson. It was a wound he carried deep, the kind that never healed. When she finally went to bed that night, she couldn't sleep. The ranch felt too quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. She sat by the window, watching the hills fade into dark. Near midnight, a faint light flickered from the barn. Jack was out there alone, sitting by the locked trunk. Emily couldn't hear what he said, but his head was bowed, his shoulders slumped like a man talking to ghosts. By dawn, the valley was quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm breaks for good. Emily woke to the sound of hammering. Jack was outside, boarding the windows, tightening every gate latch, every door hinge. His movements were sharp and certain, like a man who had already decided what had to be done. "They'll come today," he said when she stepped onto the porch. There was no fear in his voice, only fact. Emily gripped the post with cold fingers. "Jack, if you know something that can stop them, you have to tell me." He wiped sweat from his brow, looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Kansas wasn't a fight over cattle or land. It was a killing. Cole Carson and his boys took what wasn't theirs, and when folks stood in their way, they left graves behind. I saw it. I was there. I swore I'd never let them do it again. Emily felt her breath catch. "And the trunk in the barn?" "Proof," Jack said simply. "Enough to ruin them if I live long enough to hand it over." Before she could speak, hoofbeats rolled across the valley like distant thunder. 3 riders again, coming hard, not to scare but to finish. Jack loaded his rifle, eyes calm. "Stay behind me. If I fall, run for the ridge. Don't look back." Emily shook her head fiercely. I'm not running. The Carsons rode straight into the yard, guns ready. Cole dismounted first, face twisted with fury. This ends now, he snarled. You hand her over, Bennett, or we bury you both. Jack stepped forward, rifle raised but steady. You're not burying anyone, he said. You're going to ride out of here while you still can. Or I open that trunk and tell every lawman from here to Denver what you did in Kansas. The oldest son cursed and went for his gun. Emily didn't think. She fired first. The shot cracked the air, splintering wood by his boot. Her whole body shook, but she held her ground. Next one won't miss, she said, voice trembling but strong. The youngest son froze. Cole's face went pale, his bravado crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. He stared at Jack, at the rifle leveled at his chest, then at Emily's shaking hands. And he knew. This wasn't bluff. Let's go, Cole muttered, voice raw. What? His oldest son barked. I said let's go. Cole roared. His eyes locked on Jack. This ain't the last you'll see of us. Jack didn't blink. Make it the last, he said. They rode off hard, dust and thunder trailing after them. But this time there was no promise to return. Only silence. When the valley finally stilled, Emily felt her knees give out. Jack caught her before she hit the ground, steady as ever. You did good, he murmured. I was scared out of my mind, she whispered. Courage ain't about not being scared, Jack said quietly. It's about standing anyway. Days later, word spread that the Carsons had left Wyoming altogether. Nobody knew why. Nobody asked. Jack never opened the trunk in front of her, but she knew it was there if it ever needed to be shown. Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Emily worked the garden, cooked meals, fixed what was broken. Jack mended fences and kept watch, though the horizon stayed empty now. One evening she placed the old chipped teacup on the porch rail, wildflowers bright against the fading sun. Jack looked at it and smiled. You fixed it. Emily nodded. Still cracked, though. Jack's eyes softened. So are we, he said. But cracks don't mean weak. They mean we've been through something, and we're still here. For the first time in months, Emily felt the weight in her chest lift. She understood then that strength isn't about fists or guns or even secrets. It's about refusing to be broken by cruelty. It's about facing the world as you are, scars and all, and standing your ground. And that was something no man, not even a Carson, could ever take from her.